But it was a huge mind shift for me because of the inherent structure that I grew up in. I mean, I thought that everything was fine until I went to university and I realized that the person of color sitting next to me is living a remarkably different lived experience to I. And those conversations need to take place. And I think that's the fault of the older generation. You didn't have those conversations. The TRC happened and apartheid was bandaged. And now, as students are ripping that bandage off and only getting critiqued for it. Like, this conversation should have happened 20 years ago. And if not us, who else is going to do it? Because everyone's just been sitting around for 20 years. So...
Des, I'm conscious that you have to leave quite soon.
Is you going to get any questions from the audience before so? Because I have one.
I think you are. I have been glancing every now and then to see anybody who's twitching and trying to put their hand up.
Twitching, I think.
Okay. Can we get a mic here?
Hello, thanks so much for the panel. And I was really intrigued by something that you said. You said that there's a difference between whiteness, if we're using this term, and white people. And I'm curious about what that difference is. I agree with you. And I'm curious about what that difference is in the sense that, you know, you're also talking about what must be done to actually create a difference, I think, right? And you've alleged to a few different things. But if you really want to stand here and say that there's a difference between me being white and whiteness, what I receive from being white constantly wherever I go, right? The messages I understand, whatever's been internalized. If you want to say that there's really a difference, I want to understand from your perspective as an elder here, from South Africa, etc., what that is.
I'll have my 3 minutes and I'll try to answer at the same time. Let me start off by saying, as the chair of the tax committee, I go around the country and talk to all sorts of groups. And last year's budget was particularly for me intriguing. The budget, with all its flaws, and I'm not entirely going to defend it entirely, but to the extent that it is redistributed than it is, I might add that we've had more success in reducing the Gini coefficient than any other country in the world through our tax and transfer system. I can justify that if you want. So I go to this meeting, which is basically about 500, it's a budget breakfast meeting, they're awful, 500 people, probably 450 white people, most of them unbelievably overweight, much more even than me. I say this for a reason, because a very fat individual, and I'm not trying to discourage him because it was really ironic, who happens to call himself an economist, gets up to speak before me and says, "What does this budget offer for us?" And then rubbishes any attempt at redistribution or state intervention. Of course, as I pointed out, given the girth of most of these people, the budget didn't have to do anything for them, they were well fed. But the point I'm making is that it's the question of a critically reflexive attitude that is required. So what I'm arguing is that I go through it every day of my life. I understand perfectly that I was privileged. I didn't understand that a long time ago, but it's taken me time to get there. I still have inadequacies like every human being, but I try my best to understand that I was privileged. I asked myself, of course, what it was that I could have done more in the 1970s and 80s, and we can go through that. It's no point, I think, bragging about what one did. I find that quite distasteful. But one has to answer for one's own conscience. But the question then becomes, once you start reflecting on it, then you have to ask yourself, are you embracing a particular worldview, which people here would like to call whiteness? I think is very much more reflective of the dominant capitalist framework throughout the world, because much of what's spoken about takes place elsewhere. And I think whilst Marx might have got things wrong in relation to gender and race, I have no doubt that he did, I still see the world through class eyes in the main. That's my project. And I think that what one tries to do as a white person is understand that there is a concept of a cultural, economic, and social framework, which, if you wish, you can call whiteness, which is a dominant Eurocentric view, which we still hold to. In other words, we wouldn't need affirmative action, for example, if we actually accepted that standards, right, are not Eurocentrically based, that people bring all sorts of different contributions to society, and whilst we would still need redress, and we would still need to redress a god-awful history, if we actually started thinking about standards at universities and the workplaces and everything in a much broader sense, we get beyond this concept of whiteness to something else. Then you make one other, or two other points. I'm against identity politics. It's not my project. And I'll tell you why. I think the politics of pain are terrible politics. And I'll tell you why I say that. I'm Jewish. Jews have perfected the politics of pain. Bibi Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, says all the time, how dare you come and tell us that we're treating the Palestinians badly? We lost 6 million people in the Holocaust. Who are you to understand our pain and our history? The answer is you've got to go beyond that, way beyond that, in order to develop a politics that's actually going to transform our society in some fundamental way. Let me make one other point. Recently, just in relation to the inadequacy of the politics of not to suggest that that means that one doesn't understand, one doesn't actually relate to the unspeakable level of pain created and still created by racism and sexism throughout our society. But it's interesting, in a recent survey, a comprehensive one, just published last week, which I found in the City Press, nearly 80% of black respondents thought they were treated worse in public than other races. 44% of black respondents had been discriminated against by other blacks. And 77% of Indians spoke of being discriminated by their black counterparts. The real point is, if you're going to reach a project of humanity, you've got to go beyond this kind of notion of a very, very unnuanced question of identity politics, or alternatively, the sort of stuff that postmodernism led us into a political cul-de-sac. My own view, for what it's worth, is that I think you should be utterly aware of the disgraceful dominance of a particular ideological framework which shapes us. But I'm absolutely sure that unless, right across the board, we can develop a new conception of what it is to be South African, and everybody can embrace that, we're always going to be in trouble. And let me just, by way of conclusion, say this one final point. I find it extraordinary. Students aren't the only ones who protest. It's an outrageous remark. We have delivery service protests day in and day out by poor people. Students weren't the first to discover the oppressive hand of the state apparatus. The truth is, every day when people protest about lack of delivery, lack of water, lack of housing, they are clobbered by the police, oppressed by the state. They're not listened to by anybody, and no one cares a damn. And frankly, it's those people I'm worried about. And I don't care whether I'm white, black, pink, or green, unless we actually deal with that, we are in terrible shit. And that's why we are in shit, because nobody cares a damn about them. I'm far less interested in kind of a bourgeois protest movement than I am in one which is going to radically transform the fabric of the society, both ideologically, economically, and politically.